Welcome to Health is Wealth with Dr. Mike. I'm Station Manager Tina Cortez, and my co-host is Dr. Mike Cardoza. Good morning, Dr. Mike.
Good morning, Tina.
And our focus today is about how pain can be a sign that you're unhealthy. Where do we go from here?
Well, listen, you know what? It's pain is a nuisance, of course, but it's your body telling you something is going on. So this is where we have to really listen to our body. And when you look at pain and how it's related, it's always related to inflammation. This is the biggest cause. And so, we talked on our previous segment on how inflammation and, February was our big heart health month. And we talked about how cardiovascular disease and how inflammation plays a big role. But inflammation is a cause of a lot of major illnesses. So it's not just, the arthritis or the osteoarthritis that we're known to see like around in my clinic, in my practice, and patients who suffer from this, but it's more like other things that you otherwise wouldn't know. So things like heart disease, we got like things like obesity, dementia, even things like Alzheimer's disease has a component of inflammation.
Now, when you talk about inflammation, I think this is where some of us get confused. Because when we think inflammation, we think swelling. That's not the case. That's not what you mean, right?
No, okay. When you have a sprain or when you hurt yourself or you stub your toe, your body's going to have an inflammatory response, and it's going to develop some inflammatory mediators to actually help heal you. So if, the body will protect yourself from bleeding to death by recovering and responding to inflammation. But it's when your inflammatory markers are elevated so high and so frequently, this is when disease ensues. And this is when we have a problem.
Got it.
And so this is the chronic states that we see. And this is where we have things like autoimmune disease, digestive health issues, and then allergies are a big component of this as well.
In terms of diagnosing, how does that happen?
So first off, we mentioned about pain as being the symptom. So, when a lot of patients come into my practice and say, Doc, I have a lot of pain. Where's the pain located? Well, we want to look at what's the biomarkers here. And usually blood tests are the best for this, but we want to find out the culprits. So we look at certain lab tests that we'll talk a little bit later on. It depends on what the condition is. But for example, if you think about osteoarthritis, which is the most common form of arthritis, and then, rheumatoid arthritis as well. So there's a big difference between these two. So really quickly, Tina, I just want to explain what the rheumatoid arthritis factor is and osteoarthritis, what the difference is. So osteoarthritis, you'll have it in one joint. It could be in multiple joints, but it's not going to be bilateral, meaning you're not going to have it both on both knees or both arms or elbows. Rheumatoid arthritis is this autoimmune disease. So this is where you're going to have that inflammation. You can almost see individuals with both redness on both knees or both joints, and it's usually bilateral, and that's the difference. In terms of inflammatory markers will be high with both of these in terms of blood. So you also see an hsCRP elevated, and an ESR, which is erythrocyte sedimentation rate. This is the blood component when you're looking at patients. But for rheumatoid arthritis, it's specific. You'll have to look at a rheumatoid factor, which is a blood test as well, and that'll be elevated. And that's almost how you make the diagnoses. Now, it's not so much about the diagnosis. It's not so much about I have rheumatoid arthritis, I have fibromyalgia, which is another chronic pain dealt with a large part of inflammation. Now, it's not so much what diagnosis do you have, it's more on how do we combat the inflammation that is giving rise to these illnesses. And I think that's the key. So, some of the labs that we spoke about, ESR, hsCRP, there's also the interleukins, which are really important, and tumor necrosis factors as well. These are big more inflammatory markers that are really new today, but we want to look at those. And so when a patient comes in and they're with chronic pain, the reason why we want to see these markers is because, if we're going to put them on a protocol, whether it's a supplement protocol, an anti-inflammatory diet, we want to see a baseline. And us as practitioners, we want to see that this number is going to go down with our patients, because that's how we know that we're going to actually help these patients and get these patients well.
So this is how you monitor.
Correct. So, if you come in with your elevated markers and your inflammatory markers are through the roof, you want to know that these are stabilizing, not only for the patient, but also for future patients. And this is what a practice is all comprised of, is practice makes perfect, of course. So you want to definitely make sure that we know we're doing our best for our patients, and even the therapies that are coming in, we want to make sure that the patient is actually responding to treatment. And the treatment, which we're going to talk about shortly, is food. Because let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. That's my slogan, right?
It certainly is. And when we come back, meals that heal. This is Health is Wealth on 105.9 The Region. Stay with us. You're listening to 105.9 The Region, and welcome back to Health is Wealth with Dr. Mike. Who's today's guest, Dr. Mike?
Well, our special guest is Julie Daniluk. She's a registered holistic nutritionist. She hosts Healthy Gourmet. Her award-winning bestseller, which is Meals That Heal Inflammation, has helped over hundreds of thousands of Canadians and people abroad to enjoy allergy-free foods that taste great. Julie, welcome. I'm so happy you're here.
Yeah,
Great
can't wait
to
to
be
get
here,
at
Dr.
it.
Mike. Thank you so much.
I'm so happy you're
and
here.
So great.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Oh my goodness, it's a joy, absolutely, to imbibe with such wonderful fruits, beverages, teas. We're already having a good time.
We're ready to rock and roll here.
We are.
You know, I want to just talk to point a little bit about your background,
Yes.
just to introduce you a little bit, because I know everybody knows you for sure. But just in case our listeners, some of us that don't have this book, by the way, this book is amazing. So
Meals That Heal. I love that
Meals
title.
That Heal
Aw,
Inflammation
thank you.
is the best book for our listeners out there. I mean, I always promote anti-inflammatory diets, and this is one of the best with the recipes. But let's talk a little bit about your background. I want to just get into about you, because, you know, you've been doing this for a long time.
I have been doing this for a long time, first and foremost because my mother realized that I had profound ADHD and I needed to break up with sugar when I was only 7 years old. So my mom found the work of Dr. Feingold, who established that sugar and dyes and really harmful foods can cause children's ADHD to spike. At the time, it was just called hyperactivity.
Yes.
And thank goodness, once they got me off all those negative foods, my grades went from D's to A's, and I slept through the night for the first time, and my whole personality changed. And I think that really helped me fall in love with nutrition research, because when I was going through school, I was reading more about nutrition than I ever did anything else. So it felt so right to become a nutritionist. And then I just fell in love with cooking and making sure people knew how delicious these food items can be. Yeah.
Well, that's wonderful. And then, I mean, you know, then you wrote this amazing book, which has been out for a while now, right?
Yeah, it's been out for a decade,
Wow.
and that's why it has sold well over 100,000 copies. And I just keep writing about this topic because it's so important. If people understood that there's major causes underneath their pain, if they got connected to the underlying reason why you become inflamed, then we know how to turn it around quickly.
And that's the idea. This is the segment. This is what this segment's all about. We're talking about pain, inflammation. Of course, there are certain signs. But most importantly, you know, something that I pride myself out in practice, because I have a lot of patients who have food allergies.
Yes.
And so, like, allergies are a thing, right? And this can obviously cause inflammation, right?
Big time, big time. It
Can they
turns out
trigger it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So it turns out underneath all these symptoms are the causes of inflammation. And I like to now pull them into 4 different causes because it's easy to remember. And I like to say that all of them start with the letter I. So you've got 4 I's of inflammation, which is easy to remember. So out of those 4 I's are infection. Then you've got irritation from food allergies. Then you've got imbalances, nutritional imbalances. You know about nutritional deficiencies.
Absolutely.
How many IVs do you give people who desperately need a nutritional top-up, which is massive? And then we also, so let's see, we've got infection, irritation, imbalance. And the last biggie is injury, of course. You twist that ankle, you become inflamed. So if we address the core cause, we turn the inflammation off like a switch. Wow. So that's why we're with nutrition. Nutrition helps us repair injuries. Nutrition helps us fight infections. Nutrition, when we take out the allergies, we get rid of that irritation. And of course, nutrition will truly help to recover that hormonal balance once we get rid of all those irritants. So I can't believe how significant this is. And we see it with blood work. You talked so much about blood work before
Absolutely.
the break. You see a drop in the CRP the second someone addresses
Right
their
away.
food. Within a month, you'll see a shift and a reduction of pain, swelling, heat, redness, and loss of function. Those 5 cardinal symptoms that you are inflamed, you see a reduction of all those symptoms once you get rid of the core cause.
And I think it's important. I mean, you mentioned the CRP. So this is high sensitive C-reactive protein. This is the blood that we measure for our patients. And, whether they're suffering from some kind of inflammatory condition, asthma, colitis, arthritis, this is that injury. This is that injury that their body is presenting, and this is, like you mentioned, that switch, because the inflammatory cycle, these mediators, these cell responders that are actually coming to your the rescue are trying to rescue you, but these food allergies are literally turning on a switch that otherwise shouldn't be turned on and can be avoided by avoiding some of these foods, right?
And the great news is the food can taste wonderful that substitutes for your crave food. So you often crave foods that you're allergic to because you get a big pop of adrenaline to help you quench the fire. So how interesting that when we eat something we're allergic to, initially we get the incorrect signal.
Yes.
We actually get a bit of reward for eating that food because we get this rush of adrenaline that works a bit like a antihistamine. Let's look at the EpiPen for a minute, right? EpiPens are a massive dose of adrenaline. So when you eat something you're allergic to, your body elicits that response. So that's why we keep chasing the foods that we're allergic to. People have a really hard time breaking up with ice cream, pizza, cookies. But what if I told you I can give you pizza, ice cream, and cookies as long as they're free of white sugar, white flour, dairy, all those big trigger foods? We get rid of those with my cookbooks.
Wow.
And that's, I think, the most important thing, because for the longest time, I do a lot of food allergies, as you know, in my practice. And so you mentioned a good point about being deficient and nutrient deficient. And sometimes, Tina, patients would come in and we'll look at their blood work and maybe their B12s and iron will be low, and that's the only symptom. And of course, their inflammatory markers are elevated. And you're just like, wow, this is a food intolerance that we're dealing with, because this person's not, like if you sometimes see a male, for example, who's not menstruating and has low iron, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Yet you're not absorbing things. There's an issue, right?
Yeah.
And that issue sometimes is this inflammatory response as a result of consuming a food that you otherwise shouldn't be consuming and is causing this allergy. So, I mean, to understand this and to remove it. And then once you remove this from individuals, because I test a lot of people on there, when they come in for their second or third visit after their allergy testing, and they're like, oh boy, I better go eat my McDonald's before or something. And let me go eat my ice cream or my pizza or my pasta because I think he's going to take it away from me. And it's interesting how they know. It's interesting how people, and you just mentioned it, it's that rush food, but people know what they potentially are allergic to. They know. And it's sometimes they don't want to sort of believe it.
But isn't it interesting that once they get rid of that food, they had no idea how good they can feel.
How good they can feel.
They don't know how clear-headed they can feel, how their joint pain goes down, their mood improves, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, wow, I didn't realize I felt 20 years older.
And I feel better.
And now I feel fantastic. I feel like I've peeled years off myself. So it's totally worth it. You got to try it.
And exactly. And I think, it's not over. Like life is not over because you cut out gluten. Life is not over because you cut out dairy. And you mentioned that, you said it right. I mean, I eat like this. This is probably something that I obviously pride myself on. And, we don't want to miss the fun, right?
Oh, and you can have so much fun.
You can have so much fun.
I have just created a baguette that tastes exactly like a baguette. You name a food, I've pretty much got a substitution for it. Ice cream, oh my goodness, I got a chocolate ice cream that my nephew was eating it the other day. He's like, I can't tell the difference. And this is, a 25-year-old guy who typically would want to have sugar. No, he's totally enrolled in this lifestyle.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because my kids, they're quite young and they're getting older now.
Yeah.
So, there's no more trickery involved in terms of substitution trickery, because it's like, hey, let's have some ice cream. Now they're like, Dad, this is not organic, it's not gluten-free, and it's not dairy-free. Why am I eating this?
Wow.
We're talking about seven and 8-year-old kids, right?
That is so cool.
I mean,
good for you.
So it's that whole lifestyle, that lifestyle approach. Let's talk about the some anti-inflammatory foods. Let's get right in. Let's talk about diet. So there are certain foods, everybody's on this big health kick right now, right? Everybody's on this big health kick, and I love it. I love that people are trying to get healthy.
It's the new norm.
It is the new norm, and it's
That's a
books.
great way to put it.
Yeah, but it's books like this that bring not only credibility, obviously because of your background, but bring it's like almost throwing a life preserver to these individuals, because some of these people, they watch this documentary and they're inspired and they want to be vegetarian. So I had a patient that came into my office. I want to speak to this point, and it'll basically lead into our next discussion. But she came into my office and she says, "Doc, I'm changing my life." I says, "Wow, this is wonderful. I love it. This is great. I'm now a pescatarian." I says, "Oh my God, that is incredible. That's great. Do you know what?" Well, I think I know what it means. I'm going to eat fish and vegetables, right? Pesca, pescatore. It means the fisherman, and the vegetarian. So it's basically fishitarian. Anyway, so I said, "That's wonderful." Okay, so I looked at her food log and I checked out what she was eating, and she's consuming basa fish and tilapia as her main staples. And I said to her, I says, after looking at this, I said, where did you get the knowledge about the pescatarian? I think you have some good knowledge. Well, I read something that it's really good, and fish is anti-inflammatory. I said, look, you got some really good points. However, if you do it wrong, if you're not doing it correctly, you're going to get yourself in trouble. So what we talked about sustainability. And fish that are really sustainable, and being the vegetarian and showing how it's more anti-inflammatory, longevity, more cancer, depletion and sort of cancer risks and whatnot. But when we look at the fish, a basa fish is fished in the waters of China that are the most polluted waters in the world. And it comes frozen, and it's all this kind of stuff. And she had no idea, and she's eating it 3 times a week. So what I would just want to make sure all our listeners are on this, and with your help as well, Julie, if you're going to go on a trek, just really do some really good research onto the sources of where your foods are coming from. And sustainability, I think, is the most important. So if you're going to go on this vegetarian kick, if you're going to go on a gluten-free kick, or if you're going to go on a dairy-free kick, of course, we want to think about, we don't want to further toxify our bodies so that now it's just going to create, it's going to wreak havoc even more so. So in terms of diet, what advice can we give individuals? Because, this anti-inflammatory notion is important, but it also means to shop organic, right?
Organic is a big piece, because when we do good by the planet, we almost always do good for us. So shopping at your local farmer's market, shopping organically are 2 ways that you can just feel really confident about. Because when we shop local, know that even if a farmer here in Canada, they're so limited in what they're allowed to spray on a crop, where international imports, they can still use DDT. They can still use some really scary pesticides. As you talked about with fish farming, the fungicides that are allowed in international waters, etc. And the smaller the fish, the healthier the fish, and
Correct.
Often the higher in omega-3, which is a massive topic that we could talk about a whole hour on. But omega-3 is one of the most powerful inflammation reducers, and how it works is by truly helping give your every single cell of your body an oil change, so that you absolutely can have better cell communication and reduce all those inflammation markers that we talk about.
And that's amazing. And let's talk about what other foods, we spoke about and predominantly on the show about things like nightshades and vegetables. I mean, what can you give our listeners in terms of a little bit of knowledge about foods to avoid?
Okay, foods to avoid. I've got the hot list. Absolutely. So number 1, deep fried foods. Because deep fried foods, let me give you an example. Potato chips. You take a potato, you cut it into little bite-sized pieces, then you deep fry it. By deep frying it, you hyperheat the oil, which creates so much toxicity. And then you create acrylamide, a toxin that happens when carbohydrate hits frying oil, it creates this toxin called acrylamide that's terribly inflammatory. Then potatoes are one of the most serious nightshade veggies, which pro-inflammatory nightshade vegetables, which contains an alkaloid called solanine, which is very inflammatory. So potato chips are at the top of my hit list. The good news is when we take other veggies, say if you think of parsnips or something really delicious, celeriac root, and you slice it nice and thin and you bake it off at lower temperatures using good quality oils like an avocado oil, you can have that crispiness you crave. You can have that satisfaction.
Does it taste the same?
It does. Well, it
does.
tastes great.
Tastes great.
It tastes great. And you're getting that starchiness, that saltiness that you crave, but you're not getting all the inflammation that you were getting from the potato chips. So I'm all about the direct substitution. Let's use one more example. Instead of having necessarily ice cream I call triple yin death, which you'll appreciate from the traditional Chinese medicine world. When you have ice cream, you're having frozen dairy, which is extremely mucus forming, very inflammatory, and white sugar is basically just dumping inflammation on your head. Like it's the worst thing you could possibly have in your body. So bad. So when we take ice cream and we directly substitute it with some beautiful coconut cream that's whipped up with a low carb substitute, my favorite being monk fruit. So
Monk
delicious.
fruit is really good.
So good. It's an Asian sweetener that's 200 times sweeter than sugar, doesn't have any calories in it.
Is it konjac? Is it referred to?
Actually, konjac is another root vegetable that I really appreciate all these new substitutes that are coming out.
Easy to find?
It is now in places like a health food store, like Nature's Emporium, have so many of these great substitutes. And then we cream that up, and all of a sudden we're eating it, and you're like, I can't believe this is an ice cream. So just know that you can have all your pleasure, you can have all your fun, but you don't have to become more inflamed through the process.
Exactly.
With that direct substitution, you can have all that passion. Fulfilled. It's all about fulfillment.
Yes,
right?
that's the key. And I love that you bring that to the show, because it's all about, look, I like something cold, I like something creamy, right? And it's like, we can take that away, but if you substitute it, you don't have to pay the price.
How many people are told, oh, you like crunchy? Go eat celery sticks.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's not going to work. Right? You're going to last 3 days and then you fall off the diet wagon. So I say get rid of the diet wagon. Instead, slowly create your own live it versus a diet. I'm all about creating your own plan that's sustainable and works in your life.
That's the key.
Yeah.
It's more sustainability and what makes sense. When people come into the practice and they come in, and my patients, and they say, look, I want to give up this, I want to stop that. Listen, take it slow, one step at a time. You can't just give up everything. Let's give up one thing at a time. Let's substitute it. Let's just get rid of the most important things, the ones that are really affecting you.
Yes.
And then let's make some really, really serious substitutions. And I think that's how we're going to get people well. And that's the idea. So we talked about the blood test and whatnot. I mean, if we have to think about some supplements, because, most importantly, diet is probably 90% of the work. I mean, obviously, changing your diet, cutting off the foods that are that you're allergic to, and putting in some more anti-inflammatory foods, or just cutting out the pro-inflammatory foods alone will help, right? Yes. If you just cut out the pro-inflammatory foods, that will help. I mean, I have some examples here, some turmeric.
Can't wait to have this with you.
So we have some turmeric shots.
We have to have a good shot.
Yeah, we have to have a good shot. Cheers.
Anti-inflammatory here.
So this is 100% cold press turmeric, right? And
I promise you, it's not that strong.
It's
I love
really-
it. I love it.
so let's talk about the health benefits of turmeric.
I would love that. So turmeric.
Oh, by the way, Tina, you have to do it.
I will definitely do it.
It is
and
fantastic.
Dr. Mike, let's remind our listeners, where can they watch this video of you guys taking your shots?
Well, they're going to watch it on IGTV.
Excellent.
It's going to be posted, of course.
Excellent.
And we're going to cheers.
Yes,
cheers.
incredible.
But how good is it? It's so good. So let's talk about the I'm going to finish drinking mine, but
I know, right?
maybe you
I
can talk to
absolutely
us
will.
about
Sure.
what is turmeric? Like, what does it do, and why is it important to be cold pressed?
So turmeric is a fantastic root that's extremely popular in Asia and India, and it contains this active ingredient called curcumin, which is profoundly anti-inflammatory. One of the most studied of all of the herbal remedies, and I absolutely love the fact that in India, where they have the highest amount of turmeric, they see a very low incidence of dementia and Alzheimer's because the brain inflammation is so reduced by daily consumption of turmeric.
And it's real, folks.
Yeah.
I mean, this is real. This is, you can't, like, in terms of anti-inflammatory in a plant, is this probably one of the most powerful of anti-inflammatory in terms of plant?
Can anyone take it? What about someone with an irritable bowel?
Well, the only thing with turmeric that we do have to be mindful of is that certain medications we have to just check in about, and that's why it's so great. Remember, I'm here to fulfill on the prescription, but having a great naturopathic doctor or functional medicine doctor will be so important to check whether the medications you're on would fit with a supplement like this, because this does actually slow down the phase 1 process of your liver and speed up phase 2. So sometimes people just have to be mindful of that, depending on their genetics, whether they are a good fit.
Yeah. So things like blood thinners, if you're on them, sometimes it can hinder this.
Yeah.
If you have any kind of ulcers, sometimes it could. In the end, it's going to help because it's an anti-inflammatory, but it is going to burn and it is going to irritate the lining of certain intestinal issues, especially irritability. So just be careful. And whenever you're taking something, just always, run it by your doc or your functional medicine doctor. And at the end of the day, we're the coaches on the back end. And, having like a quarterback, if you will, just putting it into a sports analogy, just having a quarterback like Julie to say, hey, look, this is what we got to do to lead the team. At the end of the day, we're a team. And this is part of a team approach. Your medical doctor, your naturopath, your functional medicine, your expert, your nutritionist, we're all trying to help individuals to get to that goal. And ideally, we got to do as much as we can. And sometimes for sure foods are going to be important. So in terms of, your favorite, I'm curious. I'll tell you my favorite. What's your favorite otherwise supplement that you can't get from food that you would probably recommend to some patients?
Well, I do know that a probiotic is critically important because it not only reduces inflammation, not only heals your digestion, it also has been clinically proven to reduce anxiety. And we're going to see this more and more. They're actually being called psychobiotics because they affect your mood so profoundly, because probiotics have the power to increase your neurochemistry like serotonin, which is so exciting. So I love having a good quality probiotic. And of course, you can get it in your food by increasing your sauerkraut, your pickles, your fermented foods, especially veggies, instead of focusing on sugar ferments. We don't want to have more beer or more kombucha. We need to really focus on the veggie forms of fermentation. But I just think if you do want to have it in a pill, make sure that it's human strain, make sure it's proven strain, and make sure that it's got lots of different strains so that you replenish your good bacteria after antibiotics.
And I'm so happy that you mentioned about the prebiotic, because I was excited, because I know we didn't review this, and I knew you were going to hit us up with some education, some really good research, and especially the sauerkraut bit. I think it's great. Just to reiterate this, so there have been several studies, the RCTs, that show microbial modification actually can reduce inflammation, especially with things like GI and rheumatoid arthritis, MS, and ulcerative colitis. There is research right now. We're dealing with a microbiome issue. Bugs and beneficial bacteria, which are probiotics, actually will be treating certain infections and reducing things like inflammation. It's huge. So, this ends our show, but I'm so excited and so happy you're here, folks. For our listeners out there, Meals That Heal Inflammation. Everybody has this book, but you need to have, if you don't have it, you have to get this book. It is incredible. Some of these recipes are just amazing. You really have to get this book. And thank you very much for coming on the show. It is amazing. Such a pleasure to have you here.
It's an honor to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Julie,
guys.
where can our listeners connect with you?
At Julie Daniluk, DANILUK is my last name, and I'm available on all media fronts at my name, Julie Daniluk.
Excellent. And Dr. Mike, just before we wrap up the show, if our listeners want to connect with you and your team at AppleMed, how can they do that?
So applemed.ca is our website. You can check us out on Instagram, AppleMed Clinic, and you can check out our IGTV episodes as well. You can reach us at 905-417-4000, and we're at 3560 Rutherford, Unit 45. We're here in Vaughan, and thank you very much for listening.
That's our show for this week. If you missed any part of Health is Wealth, go to our website, 1059theregion.com. I'm Tina Cortez. Thanks for listening.